It was a regular night of delivering pizzas around my town, and I was in the middle of heading to probably my 8th or ninth customer of the night. I typically just played music and kind of spaced out as I drove between the houses and the restaurant, as it can get really boring after a while. But as I made my way down the dark, empty roads, I noticed a couple of warning lights on my dashboard suddenly turn on. It was a little alarming, but they weren't anything important, so I continued on. My car was pretty old and had a lot of miles on it, but for the most part, it did well, so I figured it must just be a false alarm or something. Unfortunately, though, as I continued down the road, more and more warning lights began to turn on before the check engine light flashed, and eventually, my car sputtered to a stop. I'd never had a car break down on me before, so I honestly wasn't too sure what to do. The first thing I did was try the ignition again just to see if it would start back up, but it was completely dead. I looked around and noticed I was pretty far from anywhere useful. I knew where I was as I'd driven down this road many times before, but the nearest place that would be open at this time was a gas station that was about a half a mile away. So I called the customer and let them know about my situation, and then I called my work and let them know as well. My manager basically said to not worry about delivering the pizza and to just figure out my car situation and then head home for the night. That actually gave me a bit of relief, knowing that I didn't have to worry about work anymore, but I still wasn't really sure what to do. I ended up calling my brother, who lived about 40 minutes away. He was the only person I knew would still be awake at this time. He picked up and immediately asked me what was going on. I told him about my situation, and he let out a big sigh, then said he could come and pick me up and drop me off at home. I told him exactly where I was and thanked him, then sat back in my car, relieved that I was able to get some help relatively quickly. After a few minutes of waiting, I opened up the box of pizza and took a couple of slices, figuring it would be a waste if I didn't help myself to it. It was actually really dark in the car since the battery was dead, so I had my phone light on and laid it on the center console so that I could see a bit better. But after about 15 minutes of waiting, I saw a figure appear from down the road walking towards my car. I felt pretty vulnerable in my position, so I turned my phone light off and hoped that when they passed by, they wouldn't even notice that I was there. Though once they got a few feet from my car, they slowed down and began looking at my car as if they were inspecting it or something. Then the man came up to my window and knocked as if he wanted me to roll it down. Of course, I wasn't able to, so I loudly spoke, telling him that I couldn't. He looked offended and responded by asking me for a lift to the gas station down the road. This was when I started to get a strange feeling about this guy, as I felt like it was pretty obvious that my car had broken down, so I knew he had to be up to something. I didn't respond and kind of just sat there watching the guy, hoping that he would go away. He continued asking for help, though, getting more and more aggressive about it. Then he went silent for a moment before suddenly grabbing the door handle and shaking the whole car as he tried to open the door. I began panicking, unsure of what to do, so I looked around for something to defend myself with, but all I could find was a small screwdriver in my glove box. At this point, the man started stabbing the window with a small knife as if he were trying to break it. He made a few large scratches on it before beginning to wedge his knife in the top of the window to forcefully push it down. I was yelling at him and screaming for help, but I knew my efforts would go unheard. He continued for over a minute with pure anger in his eyes as he tried everything to get in. But then he stopped, stood there for a moment, silent and breathing heavily. He pushed his face against the window and stared at me with rage and disgust, then smashed his fist into the door one last time before running back down the road into the darkness. When my brother arrived, I showed him the scratches and dents on my door, and we left in a hurry, calling the police on the way to my house. I'd never feared for my life as much as I did on that stranded road. But the one thing I can't get out of my mind ever since then was the look in the man's eyes as he stared at me through the window. It felt as though I was just inches away from a monster eager to perform a brutal and horrible attack on me as I sat there alone and helpless.